I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I love you so much. My name is Frances Morgan, and I'm 68 years old, a widow living alone in Philadelphia. Last night, I canceled a $200,000 check I'd written for my only son's wedding after he threw me out of the ceremony for embarrassing him in front of his new high society family. My hands were still shaking as I sat in my car outside the bank, watching the teller through the window confirm the stop payment. 42 years of sacrifice. And this was how Samuel chose to repay me. The leather steering wheel felt cold under my palms. Nothing like the warmth of his tiny fingers wrapped around mine when he was born. When did that baby who needed me for everything become the man who was ashamed of my very existence? It started 48 hours ago. I was standing in my bedroom holding up the navy dress I'd bought specially for the wedding. Not too flashy. God forbid I draw attention. But nice enough that Natalie's family couldn't say I looked cheap. The dress cost more than I usually spend on clothes in a year. But it was Samuel's wedding. My only child's wedding. My phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Samuel. "Mom, we need to talk about tomorrow." My stomach dropped. After months of planning. What could possibly need discussing now? I called him back immediately. The video connected, and there they were, Samuel and Natalie, sitting in their pristine living room with its white furniture I was always afraid to sit on. "Mom," Samuel started, and I could see him swallowing hard. Natalie's hand rested on his knee, her engagement ring catching the light. The ring I'd helped pay for, though we don't talk about that. "What is it, honey?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Mothers always know. "Natalie's family." He glanced at his fiancée. "They have certain expectations for tomorrow." Expectations. The word tasted bitter. Natalie leaned forward, her smile practiced and cold. "Mrs. Morgan, you understand that many important people will be attending, business associates of my father. Society people." "I understand," I said quietly, though I didn't. Not really. Samuel jumped in. "So, we were thinking maybe don't mention the laundromat, and definitely don't talk about paying for anything. It might make Natalie's parents uncomfortable." The laundromat. My business. The one I'd built with my bare hands after George died. The one that fed us and clothed us and put Samuel through college. The one that was paying for their wedding. And Natalie added, her voice sweet like artificial honey, "We've arranged for you to sit at table 12. It's a lovely spot." Really? Table 12. I'd seen the seating chart. Table 12 was in the back corner by the kitchen doors. Tables 1 through 3 were for Natalie's family and their important friends. "Actually," Samuel said, not meeting my eyes, "maybe it's better if you just come for the ceremony. The reception might be overwhelming for you." Overwhelming for me. The woman who'd worked 16-hour days, who'd scrubbed other people's dirty clothes until her hands bled, who'd saved every penny so he could have everything he needed. That woman might be overwhelmed by a party. "I see," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the crack forming in my chest. "You understand, right, Mom? It's just one day. One important day. One day, as if the previous 15,000 days of raising him meant nothing. After they hung up, I sat on my bed for a long time, staring at that navy dress. How many signs had I missed? How many red flags had I explained away with "he's just busy," or "he's trying to fit in with Natalie's crowd"? I thought back to all the little moments I'd ignored. The time Samuel told me not to mention the laundromat at dinner with Natalie's parents. "Just say you're in the service industry. Mom, keep it vague." The way Natalie had forgotten to invite me to the dress shopping trips, though her mother and 3 sisters were all there. The increasingly sparse phone calls, always cut short because they were crazy busy with wedding planning. Each memory was like a small cut, and I was only now realizing I'd been bleeding out slowly for years. The pattern was so clear in hindsight. The closer the wedding came, the more Samuel pulled away. No, that wasn't right. The more he pushed me away. But even then, sitting in my bedroom with the full weight of rejection on my shoulders, I had no idea what would happen the next day. I couldn't have imagined that my son, my baby boy, would do something that would shatter 42 years of unconditional love into pieces so small they could never be put back together. The sun was setting outside my window, painting the sky the color of old bruises. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of Samuel's life. I just hadn't realized that my absence was required for that happiness. "1981. Reagan was president. I was 26 years old and 8 months pregnant with Samuel when I dropped out of nursing school. The morning sickness had been brutal, lasting well into my 3rd trimester, and the clinical rotations were becoming impossible. George held me as I cried that night, promising we'd make it work on his plumber's salary. "Just until the baby's older," he'd said, rubbing my swollen belly. "Then you can go back. But babies need things. Diapers, formula, clothes they outgrow every few weeks. And George's work was seasonal. Good money in summer when people fixed their houses. Lean winters when pipes froze and nobody had cash for repairs. I took in mending at first, then laundry for the neighbors. What started as a few loads a week in our basement became a full operation in our garage. By the time Samuel was 5, I was running Morgan's laundry services out of a rented storefront, working 14-hour days while he played in the back room I'd set up with toys and books. My hands were perpetually raw from the chemicals. My back ached constantly from bending over the machines. But every sacrifice felt worth it when I tucked him in at night. "Mommy, why do your hands hurt?" he'd ask, touching the cracked skin gently. "Because I'm building something special for us," I'd tell him. "Something that will make sure you can be anything you want when you grow up." The nursing school called twice over the years, letting me know about re-enrollment options. Both times I declined. Samuel needed braces. Samuel was starting high school and wanted to play football. Equipment was expensive. Samuel got into a good college, and even with scholarships, the bills were staggering. George died when Samuel was 22, just graduated and starting his first job. Heart attack on a job site. Gone before the ambulance arrived. The life insurance helped, but I poured most of it into keeping Samuel stable during his grief therapy, time off from work to process. Anything he needed. "You're all I have left, Mom," he'd sobbed at the funeral, clinging to me like he was 5 again. "And you're all I have," I'd whispered back. "We'll get through this together." Every choice, every sacrifice, every dream deferred. It had all been for him, for the future he'd have, the life he'd build. I never imagined that life wouldn't include me. 3 years ago, Samuel met Natalie at some networking event. He was working at a marketing firm by then, trying to climb the corporate ladder. He brought her to meet me at a Starbucks, neutral ground. I realized later, not my home, not the laundromat. Somewhere her designer heels wouldn't look out of place. She was beautiful in that polished way money buys. Perfect teeth, perfect hair. Clothes that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. When Samuel introduced me, she extended her hand like she was doing me a favor. "So nice to meet you," she said, though her eyes were already scanning the room, taking in the suburban shopping center Starbucks with barely concealed disdain. "Samuel's told me so much about you." That was a lie. I could tell by how she blinked when I mentioned the laundromat. "So, you own a laundromat." The pause before the word was deliberate, like she was translating from a foreign language. "Yes, for over 30 years now. It's been a blessing. Really allowed me to raise Samuel on my own after his father passed. And Mom's business is actually quite successful." Samuel interrupted, his cheeks flushing. "She has several commercial contracts, does all the linens for some local hotels." It was true, but the way he said it defensively, almost apologetically, made my success sound like something to be ashamed of. Natalie smiled that practiced smile and barely touched her coffee the entire hour we sat there. Later, in the parking lot, Samuel hugged me goodbye. "She's great, isn't she, Mom?" "She seems nice," I managed. "Her family's a bit different from us," he said carefully. "Her dad's in banking, really successful. They have certain expectations. Expectations. Just, about image and stuff. But don't worry about it. Natalie's not like that." Except she was exactly like that. But there was a moment near the end of our coffee when her phone rang her father. From what I could gather, her whole demeanor changed, shoulders tensing, voice going higher. "Yes, Daddy's, of course, Daddy, I understand." When she hung up, She looked almost fragile. "Sorry," she'd murmured. "My parents are very involved." "That must be difficult," I'd said gently, recognizing the weight of parental pressure, even if mine had never come with money attached. For just a second, her mask slipped. "You have no idea. Maybe that's why I tried so hard with her at first. I recognized something in her, a person shaped by forces beyond their control. I just didn't realize she'd reshaped my son the same way." The engagement party should have been my first real warning. Samuel called, excited about Natalie's parents offering to host it at their country club. "That's wonderful, honey," I'd said. "What can I bring my potato salad? Everyone always..." "Actually, Mom, they're having it catered. Professional. You know, professional." As if my cooking, which had fed him for 22 years, wasn't good enough. "But here's the thing," he continued, his voice taking on that wheedling tone I remembered from his teenage years. "They're kind of expecting us to contribute financially. It's only fair since they're hosting." "Of course. How much do you need?" "Well, the whole thing is about 30,000, so maybe half of 15,000 for an engagement party." I felt my chest tighten, but heard myself saying yes. It was Samuel's happiness. After all, what was money compared to that? The party was everything 15,000 could buy. Ice sculptures, a string quartet, food I couldn't pronounce. I wore my best dress, the one I'd bought for George's funeral, and still felt like I'd wandered in from a different planet. "Everyone, this is Samuel's mother," Natalie would say when introducing me, never using my name. Just Samuel's mother, like I was a role rather than a person. Halfway through the party, Samuel pulled me aside. "Mom, could you maybe not mention that you contributed? Natalie's parents are kind of proud about hosting, and it might make them feel weird." Make them feel weird. My money was good enough to spend, but not good enough to acknowledge. But I smiled and nodded because that's what mothers do. We smile and nod and pretend our hearts aren't breaking one request at a time. The wedding expenses started rolling in after that. $50,000 for the venue deposit. "We'll pay you back after the wedding. Mom, I promise." $25,000 for Natalie's dress. It's a one-time thing. You know, every girl dreams of her wedding dress. January brought the wedding planner $5,000. March was catering $30,000. May was flowers and decorations $20,000. Each request came with promises of repayment, with assurances that this was the last thing. With Samuel's increasingly strained smile, I watched my savings account built from 30 years of other people's dirty laundry drain away. George's life insurance, meant to secure my retirement, hemorrhaged into wedding expenses. But what else could I do? He was my son, my only child, the person I'd built my entire life around. One evening, I tried to talk to him about it. He'd come by to pick up another check, something about upgraded lighting the venue. Required. "Samuel, honey, I need to be honest. This is getting to be more than I planned for. I've already given you nearly 200,000. His face went through several expressions. Surprise, guilt, something harder. "Are you seriously complaining about paying for your only son's wedding?" "I'm not complaining. Do you know what Natalie's parents spent on her sister's wedding? $500,000. $500,000. And here I am begging my mother for basic things. Basic things. A $200,000 wedding was basic. I've given you everything I have." "Samuel." "Not everything," he said quietly, looking at my small house, the pictures on the walls, the life I'd built. Dad's insurance was more than this. That's when I knew he'd been counting my money in his head, tallying up what he thought he deserved. My son had turned into someone I didn't recognize, someone who saw me as a bank account rather than a mother. But still, I wrote the check. The pattern of disrespect wasn't sudden. It crept in like fog, slow and subtle until I was completely lost in it. There was the dinner at Natalie's parents' house, where I was introduced as Samuel's mother, who owns her own business, carefully omitting what kind of business. Her mother, Eleanor, had looked at me over her wine glass real crystal. I noticed and said, "How quaint that you still work at your age. I haven't worked since Natalie was born." "I enjoy it," I'd replied, which was partly true. I did enjoy the independence, the purpose. What I didn't enjoy was the way Eleanor said work, like it was a contagious disease. Then came the incident at Natalie's friend's baby shower. Samuel had been invited, apparently. Men were included in their circle's baby showers, but my invitation must have been lost in the mail. As Natalie explained later, I only found out about it when I called Samuel that Saturday, and he was clearly at a party.
"Oh, it's just a small thing at Brittany's," he'd said. "Music and laughter in the background. You wouldn't really know anyone there. I know you." I'd pointed out, "You understand, right, Mom? It's more of a young people thing." Young people, I was being aged out of my son's life, event by event. The dress shopping was perhaps the cruelest cut. I'd assumed, foolishly, that I'd be invited when Natalie picked out her wedding dress. It's what mothers do, isn't it? Sit on those little couches and cry when their children find the one. But Natalie went with her mother and sisters on a weekend when Samuel conveniently remembered I had a big commercial order to fill. "You're so busy with work." "Mom," he'd said, "we didn't want to bother you. I saw the pictures later on social media. Champagne toasts, happy tears, a celebration of family. Just not my family." Each slight was small enough to explain away. Each excuse was reasonable enough to accept. But together, they painted a picture I'd been too afraid to see. I was being systematically excluded from my son's life, kept at arm's length like an embarrassing relative you can't quite disown. The week before the wedding, I ran into Mrs. Chen at the grocery store. She'd been bringing her laundry to me for 20 years. Watched Samuel grow up. "You must be so excited," she said, squeezing my arm. "Your boy getting married? You'll be the most beautiful mother of the groom." I smiled and nodded, not mentioning that I hadn't been invited to the rehearsal dinner. That was for wedding party only, and apparently parents of the groom didn't count. That night, I sat in my kitchen looking at the walls covered in pictures of Samuel. First day of school, high school graduation, college acceptance letter day. Every milestone, every moment that mattered. I'd been there, front and center, cheering the loudest. When had I become someone to hide? The morning of the wedding was cool and clear, the kind of June day that makes you believe in fresh starts. At 5 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table, watching the sun paint the sky pink and gold. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. On the table in front of me lay 3 things: my checkbook, my phone, and a picture of Samuel at 5 years old, grinning with his front teeth missing. I'd been staring at that picture for an hour, trying to reconcile that joyful little boy with the man who was ashamed of me. Olivia had planted the seed of doubt 3 days earlier. My granddaughter, not by blood, but by choice. The daughter of Samuel's cousin Sarah had stopped by unexpectedly. At 16, she had the kind of clarity that comes before life teaches you to make excuses for people you love. She'd seen the wedding bills spread across my coffee table, her eyes widening at the numbers. "Aunt Frances, you paid for everything." I tried to wave it off. "It's what family does. Does Samuel know how much this is costing you?" Of course he knows, but Olivia had given me a look too wise for her years. "I mean, does he know?" I'd stayed silent, which was answer enough. "Last week," she said quietly. "I was at their apartment dropping off something for Mom. Samuel and Natalie were in the kitchen, and they didn't know I was there. Natalie said—" She paused, biting her lip. "What did she say, honey?" "She said once they're married, they won't need to deal with you as much, that the money from the wedding would be the last big ask." The words hit like physical blows. Deal with me, like I was a problem to be managed, a burden to be minimized. Olivia had hugged me then, fierce and protective. "You deserve so much better, Aunt Frances. Why do you let them treat you like this?" Why indeed now, at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. The numbers were stark in black and white. Wedding venue and deposit $50,000. Natalie's dress and alterations, $25,000. Catering for 300 guests, $30,000. Flowers and decorations, $20,000. Wedding planner, $5,000. Band and entertainment, $15,000. Photography and videography, $12,000. Miscellaneous expenses,
$38,000, total $195,000. But that wasn't all. Over the past 3 years, there had been loans that were never repaid, $47,000 worth. Vacations I'd helped fund with promises of next time we'll take you, $23,000. The engagement party, the shower gifts, the little extras that added up to another $30,000. Nearly $300,000. That was what my love had cost me. My phone buzzed. A text from Samuel. Big day. Thanks for everything. Mom, see you at the church. Remember, ceremony only. Ceremony only. Like I was a casual acquaintance who might overstay their welcome. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone. My hands were steady as I dialed the bank's 24-hour line. When the representative answered, my voice was clear and firm. I need to stop payment on a check immediately. Can you provide the check number and amount, check number 4521, 200,000? That's a significant amount. Mrs. Morgan, may I ask the reason for stopping payment? The services the check was meant to pay for will no longer be needed. It took 15 minutes to complete the process. 15 minutes to undo what 3 years of manipulation had built. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the backbone I'd somehow misplaced in my desperation to keep my son's love. But I wasn't done. I called my lawyer friend, Patricia Winters, not to be confused with Natalie's mother. Pat had handled George's estate and become a friend over the years. Pat, I need to set up an education trust fund today. It's 6 a.m. Francis, I know. Can you help me? She heard something in my voice. I'll meet you at my office in an hour. By 7:00, I'd transferred the remaining money from what would have been the wedding payment into an irrevocable trust for Olivia's education. She was the only one in the family who'd shown me genuine love and respect. She deserved the investment. I was back home, carefully applying makeup, when my phone exploded with calls. 7:15 Samuel's ringtone shrieking through my bedroom. I let it ring. 7:16 another call. 7:17 another. Finally, I answered. Mom! His voice was pure panic. The venue called. The check bounced. What did you do? I stopped payment, I said calmly, fastening my pearl necklace, the one George had given me for our 20th anniversary. What do you mean you stopped it? The wedding is in 3 hours. Yes, I'm aware. You're ruining my wedding. The words came out as a shriek, so unlike the composed professional he pretended to be. In the background, I could hear Natalie's shrill voice. I told you she'd do something like this. I told you she was jealous. Jealous of what? Of losing my life savings, of being hidden away like a shameful secret. If you don't fix this right now. Samuel continued, his voice dropping to something cold and threatening. You're not welcome at the wedding. Do you hear me? You won't be welcome. Then I guess I'm not welcome, I said quietly. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken truths. For the first time in his life, Samuel had no words. His mother had finally said no. I hung up first. The church parking lot was already filling when I arrived. I sat in my car for a moment, watching wedding guests in their finery streaming toward the entrance. The morning sun caught on jewelry and silk, on expectations and assumptions about what this day would be. My phone showed 47 missed calls from Samuel, 12 from Natalie, and several from numbers I didn't recognize, probably the venue, the caterer. All the vendors about to discover their payments had vanished like morning mist. I walked toward the church with my head high, my navy dress appropriate but not apologetic. I'd earned the right to be here, paid for it in ways that went far beyond money. Samuel intercepted me at the door, his face twisted with rage. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, my baby boy all grown up and filled with hate. How dare you embarrass me like this? Embarrass you? I kept my voice level, aware of the arriving guests trying not to stare. You've been embarrassed by me for years. Samuel? That's not... He stopped as Natalie appeared, a vision in white lace and fury. This is what poor people do, she hissed, her careful composure cracking. They ruin things for everyone else because they're jealous. Poor. I almost laughed. I paid for your entire wedding. Natalie, every single penny. Samuel's mask finally slipped completely. You think I don't know you're loaded from Dad's insurance. You've been sitting on that money while I've had to beg for every little thing. There it was, the truth, naked and ugly in the morning light. You were never going to pay me back, were you? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's family money. He actually stamped his foot like the child he'd apparently never stopped being. I'm entitled to it. I'm your son. Yes, I agreed sadly. You are my son, which is why I gave you everything I had. But it was never enough. Was it? People were definitely staring now. Wedding guests getting more drama than they'd bargained for. Someone, probably one of Natalie's society friends, had their phone out recording. If you loved me, you'd want me happy. Samuel tried, switching tactics to manipulation. I do want you happy, but not at the cost of my dignity. Natalie makes me happy, and you're destroying that. No, Samuel, you destroyed it the moment you decided I wasn't good enough to celebrate with you. The moment you decided my money was acceptable, but my presence wasn't. A real mother would support her son unconditionally. The words hung between us, sharp as glass. A real mother, as if the 42 years I'd spent loving him, sacrificing for him, building my life around him, meant nothing. A real son, I said quietly, wouldn't be ashamed of his mother. Natalie stepped forward, her bouquet trembling in her manicured hands. Think about our future children, your grandchildren. Do you want them to know their grandmother ruined our wedding? The manipulation was so transparent it was almost pitiable. What will you tell them about today? Natalie, that Grandma refused to be your ATM anymore, that she finally stood up for herself. For a moment, Samuel's face crumpled, and I saw a flash of the little boy he'd been. Mom, please, I'm your only son. I wanted to fit in with Natalie's world. I was ashamed of where I came from. The honesty was brutal, but it was also too late. Then you were ashamed of me, and that's something I can't fix with a check. What will I tell our kids about today? He asked desperately. Hopefully, you'll tell them that actions have consequences, that love isn't measured in dollars, that respect isn't negotiable. Get her out of here, Natalie snapped at someone behind me. Call security. That won't be necessary, I said. I'm leaving, but Samuel grabbed my arm. You fix this right now, or you'll never see your grandchildren. You'll die alone in that pathetic laundromat. The threat was meant to break me. Instead, it freed me. If that's the kind of father you'll be, using children as weapons, then perhaps that's for the best. Security arrived then. 2 young men looking uncomfortable about removing a 68-year-old woman from a church. But I saved them the trouble, walking out with the same dignity I'd walked in with. In the parking lot, I heard Eleanor Wilson's voice carry through the morning air. Thank God the trash took itself out. The trash. 30 years of washing other people's dirty clothes, and I was trash. But at least I was free trash. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the chaos unfold. Wedding guests milled about uncertainly. The wedding coordinator ran back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. Through the church windows, I could see Natalie gesticulating wildly, her fairy tale day crumbling around her. I'd done that. Quiet. Accommodating Frances Morgan had finally said no, and their house of cards had collapsed. My phone rang. Sarah, Samuel's cousin. Aunt Frances, Olivia told me what happened. Are you okay? I will be, I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it. For what it's worth, Mom always said you enabled him too much. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. We all do what we think is best at the time. Olivia is with me. She wants to come see you later if that's okay. That would be lovely. As I drove away from the church, leaving behind the wreckage of expectations and entitlement, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the lightness that comes from putting down a burden you never should have carried in the first place. The house felt different when I returned, not empty, liberated. I walked through rooms that had witnessed 40 years of life, of love, of sacrifice. And for the first time, I saw them as mine alone. I made myself tea and sat in the living room surrounded by photographs. There was Samuel at every age, smiling, laughing, needing me. When had that need turned toxic? When had love become leverage? The doorbell rang as the sun was setting. Olivia stood on my porch with grocery bags and a determined expression. "I brought dinner," she announced, "and chocolate and tissues in case you need them." "I don't think I do," I said, surprised to find it was true. We cooked together, Olivia chattering about school and friends, carefully not mentioning the disaster of the day. But finally, as we sat down to eat, she asked, "What happens now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never not been Samuel's mother first, and everything else second. Maybe it's time to be Frances first." "From the mouths of babes," she smiled. "Tell me about the trust fund. Mom mentioned you did something." "I set aside money for your education. It's yours. No strings attached." I paused. "Well, one string. You have to actually go to college." Her eyes filled with tears. "Aunt Frances, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. You're the only one who saw me as a person, not a bank account. That deserves recognition." We talked late into the evening. I told her about dreams I'd put aside traveling to Italy, taking art classes, reading all the books I'd bought but never had time to open. She told me about her plans pre-med, following the dream I'd abandoned. "You could still take classes," she suggested. "Community college has great programs. At my age, especially at your age, what else are you going to do? Sit around waiting for Samuel to apologize." We both knew that would be a long wait. After she left, I sat with my laptop, looking at my finances with new eyes. Without the constant drain of Samuel's needs and wants, I had more than enough. The house was paid for. The business, while modest, provided steady income. I could sell it, retire properly, maybe even travel. For the first time in 4 decades, I could plan for just me. The next morning brought a registered letter. Samuel and Natalie through a lawyer demanding I honor my commitment to their wedding expenses. The language was aggressive, threatening, desperate. I called Patricia Winters. "Can they force me to pay? Did you sign anything, any contracts?" "No, just verbal promises." "Then they have no legal standing. Moreover, attempting to coerce money from an elderly parent could be seen as financial elder abuse. I can send a cease and desist if you'd like." "Please do." The weeks that followed were a revelation. I signed up for a painting class at the community center. Terrible at first, but joy isn't always about being good at something. I had lunch with friends I'd neglected, took long walks, read books in the middle of the day. The laundromat ran itself mostly. I had good employees who were happy to see me taking time off. "About time," Maria, my manager, said. "You worked too hard for too long." I heard about the wedding aftermath through Sarah. Natalie's parents had paid to save face. Furious but trapped by their own pride, the marriage happened, but the fairy tale was tarnished. Samuel had told everyone I'd had a mental breakdown, maybe dementia, definitely not to be trusted with money. "Let him," I told Sarah. "Anyone who matters knows the truth." 3 months later, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I put the house on the market. 4 bedrooms for one person made no sense, and the memories, while precious, were also heavy. "Where will you go?" Olivia asked, helping me pack boxes. "I'm looking at condos near the water, smaller, easier to manage. Walking distance to shops and restaurants." "And the painting class," she added with a grin. The house sold quickly to a young family. Watching them walk through rooms where Samuel had taken his first steps, I felt not sadness, but completion. This house had served its purpose. Time for it to shelter another family's dreams. I donated Samuel's childhood things to charity, keeping only a few precious items. Let some other mother treasure these toys, these books, these remnants of innocence. The condo was perfect. 2 bedrooms, modern kitchen, a balcony overlooking the Delaware River. I hung my amateur paintings on the walls, filled the rooms with color and light and possibility. That's where I was 6 months after the wedding when the doorbell rang. Samuel stood in my doorway looking older, tired. Behind him, Natalie held a baby. "Mom," he said, and his voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Can we come in?" I could have said no. Part of me wanted to, but I stepped aside. Let them enter this new space that had never known their disappointment. "This is nice," Samuel said, looking around awkwardly. "Thank you." Natalie shifted the baby, her designer clothes wrinkled, her perfect hair showing roots. Reality, it seemed, had been less kind than expectations. "This is George," Samuel said. After Dad, the baby was beautiful, all pink cheeks and curious eyes. My grandson carrying my husband's name. The manipulation was obvious but effective. I felt my heart twist. "He's lovely," I said, not reaching for him, though my arms ached to hold him. "Mom, we need to talk," Samuel began. "No," I said gently. "We don't. You made your choice. Samuel, you chose shame over love, money over relationship. I've made my peace with that." "I was wrong," he said quickly. "I see that now. Being a parent, it changes you, does it?" "Because being your parent changed me, but apparently not in ways you valued." Natalie spoke for the first time. "We're struggling. My parents cut us off after the wedding fiasco. Samuel's job isn't what we thought. You need money," I finished. "And you thought bringing the baby would soften me up." The silence confirmed everything. "Samuel, let me tell you what I've learned in these 6 months," I said, sitting in my new comfortable chair, the one I'd bought just for me. "Love isn't a bank account. It's not unlimited withdrawals with no deposits. It's not using a child as emotional currency. We're not," Samuel started. "You named him after your father to manipulate me. You brought him here hoping I'd crumble. That's exactly what you're doing." The baby fussed, and Natalie bounced him awkwardly. She'd probably had nannies in mind. Help that money would have bought. "I'm not the same woman you threw out of your wedding," I continued. "That woman died that day. Samuel, the one who exists now, has boundaries, self-respect, a life that doesn't revolve around your needs. So you won't help us?" His voice was bitter, the old entitlement creeping back. "I'll love you from a distance, with boundaries. But help no. You're adults. Figure it out the way your father and I did, the way millions of parents do without family money to cushion them. You're going to let your grandson suffer because of pride. I'm going to let his parents learn what struggle teaches, resilience, humility, the actual value of money earned rather than given." They left soon after, Samuel's face hard with anger, Natalie's pinched with desperation. The baby-sweet George gurgled as they walked away. And I allowed myself one moment of grief for the grandmother I might have been in a different story. But this was my story now, and I was finally the author. That night, Olivia called. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "You know what I really am?" "No regrets." I thought about it. Regrets are for people who had choices. I did what I thought was right for 42 years. Now I'm doing what I know is right. "I love you, Aunt Frances. I love you too, sweetheart. How's the pre-med program?" We talked for an hour about her classes, her dreams, her challenges. This was what family should be. Mutual support, genuine interest, love without price tags. A year later, I was packing for my first trip to Italy. 69 years old and finally seeing Venice, Rome, Florence, all the places I'd dreamed about while sorting other people's laundry. My phone rang, an unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Mrs. Morgan, this is Eleanor Wilson, Natalie's mother, the woman who'd called me trash. What can I do for you, Eleanor?" My voice was cool but polite. I owe you an apology, and perhaps an explanation." I stayed silent, letting her fill the space. "Natalie and Samuel are divorcing. It's ugly. She's saying things about him, about you. I'm beginning to understand. We may have misjudged the situation." We did," she admitted softly. "I pushed Natalie to marry well, to marry up. I didn't realize I'd taught her to see people as opportunities rather than partners." I thought of that moment in Starbucks when Natalie's mask had slipped. "Your daughter was under a lot of pressure." "Yes, Joseph and we had expectations. Natalie was supposed to be our success story. We pushed her to find the right husband, the right connections. We didn't realize she would push Samuel to reject you. I think Samuel made his own choices. Perhaps, but there's something you should know. The money they took from you. It wasn't all for the wedding. My heart sank. What do you mean? They were going to use part of it to put a down payment on a house in our neighborhood, to be closer to us, to fit in with our world. I closed my eyes, absorbing this fresh betrayal. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've lost my daughter, Eleanor said, her voice cracking. She won't speak to me. Says I ruined her life with my expectations. And seeing what happened with you and Samuel, I don't want to die with this rift between us. It was strange to hear this proud woman, this woman who'd looked down on me from the height of her privilege, now seeking connection. Perhaps even absolution. I hope you find peace with Natalie, I said finally. Family rifts are painful for everyone. Yes, well, I also wanted to warn you. Samuel might reach out. He's been saying things about contesting your will, about the money you owe him. Let him try. My lawyer is excellent. Yes. Well, I also wanted to say, what you did took courage. Walking away from your own child. I didn't walk away from my child, Eleanor. I walked away from the stranger he became. And maybe if more parents did that, we'd raise better adults. She hung up without saying goodbye. But she'd said enough. Italy was everything I'd dreamed and more. I stood in the Sistine Chapel, neck craned to see Michelangelo's masterpiece, and wept for the beauty of it. All those years of staring at ceilings while folding sheets. And I'd never imagined anything could be this magnificent. I learned to order coffee in Italian, to navigate narrow streets, to be alone without being lonely. I sent postcards to Olivia, to Sarah, to the few friends who'd stood by me, not to Samuel. That door remained closed. On my last night in Rome, I sat at a small cafe, watching the sun set over ancient stones. The waiter, noticing I was alone, asked if I was waiting for someone. No, I said in my broken Italian. Solo io. Just me. He smiled. Allora, you must have the best table. And he moved me to a spot overlooking the piazza where I could watch life unfold in all its messy beauty. I thought about Samuel then, wondering if he ever thought about me. Did he regret that morning at the church? Did he tell his son, my grandson, about the grandmother who'd loved him too much, and then not at all? It didn't matter. I'd spent 42 years living for someone else's happiness. The rest of my years, however many they were, belonged to me. When I returned home, there was a letter waiting. Samuel's handwriting. No return address. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. Natalie's gone. Took George. I see now what I threw away. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Your son. Samuel, I held the letter for a long time, feeling its weight. Then I filed it away with all the other artifacts of a life I no longer lived. Maybe someday I'd answer it. Maybe forgiveness would come with more time, more healing, or maybe some bridges, once burned, light the way to better places. That night, I signed up for a pottery class, 69 years old and still discovering what these hands could create when they weren't serving others. The laundromat sold the following year to a young couple who reminded me of George and me, full of dreams and determination. I kept a small percentage, enough for income, but let them take the reins. Maria stayed on as manager, and I became the retired owner who dropped by occasionally with cookies and unsolicited advice. You seem happy, Maria told me one afternoon. Lighter? I am, I said, and meant it. Olivia graduated pre-med with honors. I sat in the auditorium, tears streaming as she walked across the stage. She dedicated her thesis to me, to my grandmother, who taught me that sacrifice without self-respect is just slow suicide. Afterwards at dinner, she showed me her acceptance letter to medical school. I'm going to be a doctor, Aunt Frances, like you should have been. No, I corrected gently. You're going to be a doctor like you should be. Your dreams, not mine. Still, you inspired me. Then something good came from all of it. I was in my pottery class when a woman I didn't recognize entered the studio. She was around 30, elegant in a way that reminded me of Natalie, but softer somehow, less calculated. "Mrs. Morgan?" she asked, approaching my wheel. I looked up, hands covered in clay. "Yes, I'm Melissa Harper. I'm a family therapist. Your son Samuel has been seeing me for the past few months." My hands stilled on the clay. "I see. He asked me to give you this." She held out an envelope. "He wanted to write to you again, but was afraid you wouldn't read it. So he sent a stranger to ambush me at my pottery class." She smiled. "He said you'd say that. He also said to tell you he's not asking for money. He just wants you to know that he's working on himself." I took the envelope with clay-covered fingers, leaving smudges on the white paper. "Thank you for delivering it. But I hope you've also told Samuel that forgiveness can't be rushed or demanded." "That's exactly what we're working on," she said. "The letter explains more, but I wanted to meet you. Samuel talks about you a lot. I'm sure he does. Not the way you think. He talks about the mother who worked her fingers raw so he could have opportunities, the mother he betrayed. I didn't know what to say to that. "Just read it when you're ready," she said gently. "No pressure, no timeline." After she left, I set the letter aside and returned to my clay. The bowl I was making collapsed under my trembling hands, but that was okay. Clay can be reshaped. Some things can't. I didn't open the letter for a week. When I finally did, sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, Samuel's words poured out like a confession. "Mom, I'm writing this from my new apartment. It's small, 1 bedroom. Nothing like the house Natalie and I had planned to buy with your money. I can see now how entitled that was. How cruel. I've been in therapy for 6 months. Dr. Harper is helping me understand how I became someone who could treat his own mother like I treated you. We've talked about narcissism, about entitlement, about how easy it is to justify cruelty when you convince yourself you deserve more than you have. Did you know that when I was little, I used to brag about you to my friends? My mom owns a business. I'd say, I was so proud. When did that pride turn to shame? When did I start measuring your worth, my worth, by the standards of people like the Wilsons? I lost everything after the wedding. Natalie left 3 months later. She couldn't handle downgrading when her parents cut us off. Took George to California to live with her sister. I see him twice a year. I lost my job too. Turns out Natalie's father had more influence at the firm than I realized. I'm working at a smaller company now. Less money, more hours. For the first time in my life, I'm truly supporting myself. I don't tell you this for sympathy. I tell you because you were right about struggle teaching resilience. I'm finally growing up at 35. Better late than never, I guess. I want you to know that I think about that day at the church every day. I see myself through your eyes, this entitled, cruel stranger wearing your son's face. I hate that person. I'm trying not to be him anymore. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that the lessons you tried to teach me all those years about hard work, about dignity, about treating people with respect, they finally took root. It just took losing everything to make me see. George asks about you sometimes. He's 3 now, talking in sentences. "Where's Grandma?" he asked last time I had him. I didn't know what to say. I've enclosed my new contact information. No pressure. You owe me nothing, certainly not a response. But if someday you want to know your grandson, or if you're willing to let me try to earn back any small measure of your respect, I'll be here. With love and regret. Samuel. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I poured another glass of wine and watched the river flow below my balcony. Always moving. Never the same water twice. You can't step into the same river twice. The philosophers say, you can't go back to what was, but perhaps you can build something new on the far shore. I didn't call Samuel that night, or the next day, or that week. Some wounds need time to form scars strong enough to bear weight. But I did something I hadn't done in nearly 2 years. I took out a photo of Samuel as a child, his gap-toothed smile so full of hope and possibility. and placed it on my mantel. A small step. A beginning, perhaps. Olivia noticed the photo the next time she visited. "Are you thinking of calling him?" she asked, curling up on my couch with tea. "I'm thinking about it," I said. She laughed. "Very philosophical, Aunt Frances. What would you do, honestly?" She considered this, her young face serious. "I'd be cautious, but I'd also remember that everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst mistakes. When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher." She squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But for what it's worth, I think Samuel is genuinely trying." "How do you know?" "He called me last month, asked about my med school applications. Wanted to know if you were happy." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're building a life based on what you want, not what others need from you. That you're creating beauty with your hands instead of just cleaning up after others." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "I also told him that if he ever hurt you again, I'd personally ensure he regretted it." I laughed through my tears. "My fierce protector. Always," she promised. That night, after Olivia left, I took out Samuel's letter again. I traced my fingers over his handwriting, thinking of the little boy who used to draw me pictures, who'd sign them "Love from your Samuel." I didn't call him. Not yet. But I did something else. I started a letter of my own. Not of forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, but of possibility, of conditions, of boundaries that would need to be respected if we were ever to rebuild any kind of relationship. "Dear Samuel, I received your letter. Thank you for your honesty. Words that had been locked inside me for 2 years finally began to flow, not with bitterness or anger, but with clarity, with the wisdom that comes from standing in your truth and refusing to be moved by guilt or manipulation." The woman who started that letter was not the same one who had stood in a church parking lot hearing herself called trash. She was stronger, clearer, more herself than she had ever been, and that was worth every painful step of the journey. 5 years have passed since that morning at the church. 5 years of painting classes and pottery wheels, of books read and places visited, of friendships renewed and boundaries maintained. I'm 73 now, living proof that life can begin whenever you decide to claim it. My condo walls are covered with my own paintings, amateur but authentic, imperfect but mine. The spare bedroom is Olivia's whenever she needs it. Though she's busy with her medical residency now, sometimes I run into people who knew us before. They ask about Samuel, their eyes hungry for drama. I tell them he's living his life and I'm living mine. And that's all anyone needs to know. The truth is more complex. I did answer Samuel's letter 3 months after I received it. My response wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. I set clear expectations, no requests for money, no manipulation, no weaponizing his son. I told him I was willing to have coffee, once, and we would see where things went from there. We met at a neutral location, the same Starbucks where he'd first introduced me to Natalie. It seemed fitting somehow, coming full circle. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees. He stood when he saw me, awkward, uncertain. "Mom," he said, and there was a tremor in his voice. "Samuel." I took the seat across from him, accepting the coffee he pushed toward me. Up close, I could see the changes in him. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple khakis and a button-down that had seen better days. His face was thinner, with new lines around his eyes and mouth, but his eyes were clearer than I remembered. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I." The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of hurt and regret. "How's George?" I asked finally. Something in his face softened. "He's good, growing so fast. He's in pre-K now. Loves dinosaurs and space." He pulled out his phone, hesitated. "Would you like to see a picture?" I nodded, and he showed me a photo of a laughing boy with Samuel's eyes and Natalie's delicate features. "He's beautiful," I said, and meant it. "He asks about you sometimes. I've told him his grandma is an artist who lives by the river." "Is that all?" "No, I've told him the truth, as much as a 5-year-old can understand, that I hurt you badly, and we're trying to find our way back to each other. Are we? He put down his phone. I hope so. I know I don't deserve it. But I hope so. I sipped my coffee, gathering my thoughts. Tell me about your life now. And he did. The small marketing firm where he worked, the modest apartment he rented, his therapy sessions, his struggles with the limited time he had with George, the lessons he was learning about living within his means, about finding value beyond material success. The irony, he said with a rueful smile, is that I'm finally the person you raised me to be. It just took losing everything to get here. Not everything, I corrected gently. You still have your health, your intelligence, your capacity to change. Some people never find that, even with all the money in the world. We talked for 2 hours, not about the past that would come later, in small doses, when the foundation was stronger, but about the present, about who we were now, these two strangers connected by blood and history and hurt. When I finally rose to leave, he stood too. Can we do this again? He asked, and I could hear the hope and fear in his voice. Yes, I said, but slowly. Samuel, trust takes time to rebuild. I know. He hesitated, then asked, would you like to meet George sometime? Not yet, if you're not ready. But someday, the question caught me off guard. The grandmother in me wanted to say yes immediately, but the woman I'd become knew better than to rush. Let's take this one step at a time, I said. Let's make sure we're on solid ground before we bring a child into this. He nodded, accepting my boundary. That's fair, more than fair. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not healed, not yet, but healing. Moving forward rather than stuck in the past. Our coffee meetings became a monthly ritual, sometimes awkward, sometimes surprisingly easy. We were building something new, not the blind devotion of before, not the entitled expectation of a son who saw his mother as a resource rather than a person. 6 months of coffees, then dinner at a restaurant. Then finally, I invited him to my condo. He stood on my balcony, looking out at the river. This is beautiful, Mom. Thank you. It suits me. He turned, taking in the paintings on the walls, the pottery pieces on shelves, the books stacked by my reading chair. You've built a real life, one that's just for you. Yes, I'm glad. And he seemed to mean it. You deserve this. You always did. Later, as he was leaving, he paused at the door. Mom, I've been thinking about something. I want to pay you back. My guard went up immediately. Samuel, not all at once, he said quickly. I know I can't, but in installments, even if it takes the rest of my life. That's not necessary. It is to me. His voice was firm. I took advantage of you. I need to make it right. I studied his face, looking for manipulation or ulterior motives, but all I saw was sincerity and the determination I'd once seen in the mirror every day as I built my business from nothing. We'll talk about it, I said finally. But not today. He nodded, respecting my boundary once again. Whenever you're ready. After he left, I sat on my balcony watching the boats on the river, thinking about redemption and second chances and the price of both. 3 more months passed before I agreed to meet George. We chose a park with a playground, neutral territory where the boy would feel comfortable and where our interaction could be natural rather than forced. I arrived early, my heart pounding in a way it hadn't since I walked into that church 5 years ago. But this time, the fear was different, not of rejection or humiliation, but of connection, of loving this child and being loved in return, of the vulnerability that comes with opening your heart after you've so carefully guarded it. I saw them before they saw me. Samuel holding the hand of a small boy who skipped beside him, chattering away, even from a distance. I could see George's animation, his energy. They reached the bench where I waited. Samuel knelt down to his son's level. George, this is your Grandma Frances. The boy studied me with solemn eyes, Samuel's eyes. You're the artist, he said. Yes, I am. Daddy says you make bowls too. I do. Would you like me to make one for you sometime? He considered this with the gravity only a 5-year-old can muster. Can it be blue? Blue is my favorite. It can absolutely be blue. And just like that, I was a grandmother. Not by right or blood alone, but by the simple acceptance of a child who saw me not as the victim of a family drama, but as someone who could make him a blue bowl. We spent 2 hours at the park. I pushed George on the swings, watched him climb the jungle gym, sat beside him in the sandbox. Samuel kept a respectful distance, letting us find our own rhythm together. When it was time to leave, George looked up at me. Will I see you again? Would you like that? He nodded emphatically. Yes, and don't forget my blue bowl. I won't, I promised. As they walked away, George's small hand in his father's, I felt the last piece of ice around my heart begin to melt. Not completely, some scars remain forever, but enough to let the light in again. A year into our reconciliation, Samuel asked if he could bring George to my condo for the afternoon. Natalie was getting remarried and moving to Chicago with her new husband. George would be splitting his time between Philadelphia and Chicago, and Samuel wanted him to have stable places in both cities where he felt at home. I'd like your place to be one of those places for him here, he explained. If you're comfortable with that. I was touched by the request, by the trust it implied. Of course. When they arrived, George ran straight to the shelf where I'd placed the blue bowl I'd made him. You kept it, he exclaimed. Of course I did. It's waiting for you whenever you visit. Samuel had brought a few of George's things, a favorite stuffed dinosaur, some books, a special blanket. I thought maybe we could keep these here, he said, for when he stays over. If that's okay. The sight of those small belongings, tokens of a child's life, nearly undid me. 5 years ago, Samuel had threatened that I'd never see my grandchildren. Now he was creating space for his son in my home. That's more than okay, I said, after we settled George with a book. Samuel and I sat on the balcony, watching the river while keeping an eye on the boy through the glass door. Natalie's moving, he said, though I already knew. How do you feel about that? He considered this, relieved, honestly. It's been hard co-parenting when she's so close. Every pickup and drop-off is tense. The distance might actually help. And George, he's resilient. Kids adapt, and he loves the idea of having 2 cities to explore. He paused. Mom, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. I've been saving. It's not much yet, but I want to start paying you back for what I took. Samuel, please, Mom, I need to do this. Not because you need the money, but because I need to make amends in a tangible way. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The entitled young man who demanded my savings was gone. In his place was someone who understood the value of what he'd taken, not just in dollars, but in trust. All right, I said finally, but not to me, to Olivia's education fund. Add to what I've already put aside for her. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. That's perfect. We sat in companionable silence, watching a barge move slowly up the river. You know, he said after a while, I think about that morning at the church a lot. How different everything would have been if I'd just stood up to Natalie and her family. If I'd been proud of you instead of ashamed. We can't change the past. Samuel, no. But we can learn from it. He turned to me, his eyes serious. I'm teaching George about dignity, about treating people with respect regardless of what they do for a living or how much money they have. I don't want him to ever become who I was. He won't, I said with certainty, because you're not that person anymore. Inside, George had fallen asleep on the couch, his dinosaur clutched to his chest, his face peaceful in the afternoon light. The years pass, as they always do. George is 8 now, spending 1 weekend a month with me while Samuel takes night classes to finish his MBA. Olivia is in her 2nd year of residency, specializing in geriatric medicine inspired, she says, by my journey. I'm 75, still painting, still making pottery, still discovering new parts of myself. Last month I started volunteering at a women's shelter, teaching art to children who've seen too much darkness in their young lives. It feels right, using my hard-won wisdom to help others find their own strength. Samuel continues to transfer money to Olivia's education fund every month without fail. Small amounts, but consistent. A symbolic restitution that means more in intention than in dollars. We found a new balance, my son and I, not the unquestioning devotion of before, but something healthier, mutual respect, clear boundaries. The understanding that love isn't proven through sacrifice or measured in dollars. Eleanor Wilson called last Christmas. Natalie was pregnant with her second child but wanted no contact with her mother. The wheel of family dysfunction turning to a new generation. "How did you do it?" she asked me. "How did you rebuild with Samuel after everything?" "Slowly," I told her. "With boundaries, with honesty, and with the understanding that reconciliation doesn't mean erasing the past. It means building a future that acknowledges what happened and chooses a different path forward." Do you think there's hope for Natalie and me? There's always hope. Eleanor. But it has to come from both sides. You can't force it. After we hung up, I thought about the strange turns life takes. 5 years ago, Eleanor Wilson had called me trash. Now she was calling me for advice. The world has a way of humbling us all eventually. Last week, I received a package from Samuel. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. George is a baby, maybe 6 months old, sleeping peacefully in his crib. And beside it, a handwritten note. "Mom, I found this while going through old pictures. This was taken the night before Natalie and I came to your condo asking for money. I was so desperate then, so lost. I thought if you just saw him, you'd give us whatever we asked for. I'm grateful every day that you said no, that you loved me enough to let me fail, that you had the strength to set boundaries I couldn't set for myself." George asked me something interesting yesterday. He said, "Daddy, why does Grandma Frances have so many pictures of you when you were little, but none when you were my age or a teenager?" I didn't know how to answer at first. Then I told him the truth that there was a time when we were apart, when I made bad choices that hurt you deeply. He thought about this very seriously, then said, "But you said sorry and meant it, right?" When I said yes, he nodded like that solved everything. "That's what you tell me. Say sorry and mean it, and do better next time." Out of the mouths of babes. Right, I'm still saying sorry. Mom, I'm still trying to do better. Thank you for giving me the chance. Love, Samuel. I placed the photo on my mantle, next to the picture of Samuel at 5 with his gap-toothed smile. The before and after of our story, with all the messy middle parts held in our hearts rather than displayed for the world to see. George spent last weekend with me while Samuel attended a conference. We made cookies, painted pictures, built a fort in the living room. Ordinary grandmother things that once seemed impossible. As I tucked him into bed in the spare room that has gradually become his room, he asked me a question. "Grandma Frances, were you always an artist?" "No, sweetheart. For a long time, I was just a laundry lady. I cleaned other people's clothes so your daddy could have nice things." He considered this. "Was that a good job?" "It was an honest job. It let me take care of your daddy when he was little." "But you like being an artist better." "I do, but I couldn't be an artist then. Sometimes we have to wait for the right time in our lives to become who we're meant to be." He nodded, accepting this with a child's simple wisdom. "I'm glad you're an artist now. Your paintings make me happy." "You make me happy, George." After he fell asleep, I sat on my balcony watching the lights reflect on the river, 75 years old, and still discovering joy in unexpected places. Still learning that the heart's capacity for love isn't diminished by hurt, but expanded by forgiveness, the kind that comes with boundaries and respect, not the kind that invites further harm. This morning, I woke early and made coffee, carrying it out to the balcony to watch the sunrise. The eastern sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, the water below reflecting the light in shimmering patterns. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Hey, Grandma Frances. Just checking that we're still on for dinner Friday. I have big news to share." I smiled, suspecting what the news might be. Olivia had been dating a fellow doctor for nearly 2 years now. Perhaps there was an engagement to announce. Absolutely. Can't wait to hear your news. Love you. As I set down my phone, I thought about the tapestry of my life, the threads of sacrifice and service that had dominated for so long, the dark period of betrayal and hurt, and now these newer threads of joy and creativity, of relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I'm not the same woman who stood in that church parking lot 5 years ago, hearing herself called trash. That woman was just beginning to find her voice, to stand in her power. The woman I am now is fully herself artist, grandmother, friend, mentor, no longer defined solely by what she gives to others, but by who she is at her core. If I could go back and speak to my younger self, that 26-year-old who dropped out of nursing school, who began taking in laundry to support her child, what would I tell her? That the sacrifices will be worth it, but not in the ways she expects. That love without boundaries isn't love at all, but codependence. That it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. That dignity has a price, but it's always worth paying. I don't regret the choices I made. Each one led me here, to this balcony, to this sunrise, to this moment of peace. But I'm grateful for the choice I finally made to value myself, to demand respect, to walk away from toxic love, even when it broke my heart to do so. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to say no, to set a boundary, to refuse to participate in our own diminishment. My phone buzzed again. A text from Samuel George. Can't stop talking about the cookies you made. Any chance you saved the recipe? I'd like to try making them with him here. I smiled and typed back, of course, I'll email it to you. How about you both come for dinner next weekend? We can make them together. That would be great. Mom, thank you. Simple words, ordinary communication. But 5 years ago, they would have seemed impossible. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't happen all at once in grand, dramatic moments. It happens in small steps, in quiet choices, in the gradual rebuilding of trust, one interaction at a time. I finish my coffee as the sun rises fully above the horizon, painting the river in golden light. Another day stretches before me. My pottery class this morning, lunch with a friend, an evening of reading or painting, or simply sitting here watching the water flow. A day that belongs entirely to me, shaped by my choices, filled with things that bring me joy, that perhaps is the greatest victory of all. Not the reconciliation with Samuel, though that brings its own measure of peace. Not even the relationship with George, precious as it is. No, the true victory is in the woman I've become, the one who finally learned that love, real love, doesn't require the sacrifice of self-respect, the one who discovered that it's never too late to begin again, to create a life that honors your own worth. At 75, I'm more myself than I've ever been, more whole, more at peace, and that is worth every difficult step of the journey. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever had to choose between maintaining a relationship and maintaining your dignity? Comment below and share your story. And if you enjoyed Frances's journey, check out 2 other stories that are channel favorites. My son-in-law called me worthless at Thanksgiving dinner, and I found out my husband had a secret family on our 40th anniversary. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, it's never too late to choose yourself.